Throughout the game of college football, we have seen plenty of examples of players who possess extreme levels of talent, yet are prohibited from thriving on the field because of anything from a substance to that player's behavior and priorities. Guys like Johnny Manziel, Josh Gordon, and many others who have had stints of balling out on the gridiron, but in the long run are unable to sustain that success due to an off-field issue. One case that I've actually done a video on is that of Ajay Hall, who attended Alabama as a 5-star back in the 2022 class and showed incredible flashes of greatness, but due to his immaturity and lack of commitment, he was not able to consistently put those skills on display. But the guy we'll be talking about in this video has a unique journey of his own, since the majority of his problems arose during his recruitment, and it did not exactly jeopardize his whole football career, seeing as he is with the Rams right now, but what it did do was raise question marks as to the kind of commitment he brings to the table and possibly held him back from showing his full impact. Zach Evans was one of the highest rated recruits in the country, coming out of the powerhouse of North Shore High School in Texas, and has now just finished his rookie season with the Rams. In this video, we go over the football career and wild recruitment process of Zach Evans. So let's get into it. Now, Zach, being a high 5-star recruit in the ESPN 300 rankings, possessed the size and ability to make a big impact in college football. So he had plenty of offers and plenty of schools to choose from, but for whatever reason decided to take the most difficult and complicated route to actually committing and staying with a program. This could get difficult to follow, so just bear with me, but this is the journey of Zach Evans' recruitment from the end of his junior year of high school until his enrollment at TCU. February 8th, 2019. After coming off an amazing junior season in which he rushed for over 1,700 yards and 29 touchdowns, as well as leading his team to a state title, he was named the #1 overall prospect in the ESPN Junior 300 rankings. June 7th. One of his boys, Damian George, who played offensive tackle on North Shore, commits to Alabama, and this is noteworthy because a week before this, he told 24/7 Sports that he and his boy were a package deal, but he took no other action after Damian committed. Nothing else of significance happened over the summer, so now we're getting into his senior season. September 5th, Zach missed the team's second game of the season for what was dubbed disciplinary reasons. All that his coach had to say about that was, "We're working through some things, but we love him to death. He's a great teammate, and we're going to continue to work," which tells us absolutely nothing. He was also reportedly supposed to announce his commitment on this day, but he didn't. Not sure how true that is, but based on the following events, it was more than likely accurate. September 20th. He tweets this with no date or further information and takes no other action besides this. September 27th. After missing 2 games, he makes a return to the lineup and off of only 8 carries, rushes for 133 yards and 2 touchdowns. His talent was absolutely undeniable, but if you remember, he also missed the team's second game of the season, which means that in between that game and this game, he missed a whole other game. During October and November, he takes official visits to LSU and Texas A&M, who seem to be heavy favorites for Zach. December 1st. He announces that in 3 days, December 4th, he'll make his decision known on where he is going. At this point, the finalists have been narrowed down to 4 schools, which include Alabama, Georgia, LSU, and Texas A&M. December 3rd, the day before he has said he'll make his announcement, he randomly decides that's not what he's going to do and instead says that he'll make the announcement on January 2nd at the Under Armour All-American game. December 14th. North Shore is playing in a state semifinal game, but Zach, who was attempting to graduate early in order to enroll at school in the spring, was taking the ACT and missed much of the game, but still managed to show up and rush for 176 yards and 2 touchdowns. Now, I don't know exactly how much of the game he was there for, but we know it wasn't the whole game, and this dude was still pushing 200 yards. So I'll say it again, his talent was undeniable, and North Shore ended up winning that game 49-38. December 19th, it's the start of the early signing period, and Zach quietly signs and sends a letter of intent to Georgia while still planning to make his decision public at the All-American game on January 2nd. December 21st, this is a big one right here. North Shore was set to play in the state title game, but Zach was sent home by the coaches for violating team rules. Again, no specifics were given, but this dude had to have done something so bad because this is the team's star player and it's his senior season. And I say that to make known that there was most likely a lot of leeway given to Zach, seeing as he was the main guy on offense for this powerhouse school. So to send him home in literally the most critical point in the season should not be taken lightly. Like, that's a big red flag. You also got to remember that this is Texas high school football, so there was pretty much nothing else that mattered besides winning a state title, and yet even taking that into consideration, this dude was still not allowed to play in his final high school game. January 2nd, the day of the All-American game. Shockingly, but not really at all, Zach decides to not make his announcement and issues an apology at the game instead of just making his announcement for not only failing to make his announcement, but also all the behavioral problems that he had got into during his senior season. He was essentially trying to assure college coaches that he was a good kid and not a troublemaker. And all I have to say on that is that anyone who is actually a good kid and not a troublemaker shouldn't have to assure other people that he is. So once again, this guy has failed to keep his promises, and it's now getting to a point where he is having to publicly apologize to save his reputation. January 7th, the spring semester has begun at Georgia, but they have decided to release Zach from his letter of intent. Obviously, it's most likely due to his behavior pattern, which is something that Kirby Smart would not let fly, so it wasn't exactly shocking when it happened. Due to this, he was not able to sign another letter of intent, even though it was Georgia who had released him. February 5th, the regular signing period has begun, and now Zach has to wait until summer to enroll at his chosen school, which he has still not announced. February 19th, he takes his last official visit to Florida, and then a month later, on March 13th, the NCAA suspends in-person recruiting due to the pandemic. And finally, on May 11th, he enrolled at TCU, which had not been considered to be in the mix at all, but what my theory is that at the time, TCU was probably his best option. When he signed with TCU, he became the team's highest rated recruit that then Coach Gary Patterson had ever landed. And when you think about it, although it was probably his best option, it was not at all the best thing for him. This dude came into TCU knowing that he was the best player they've had since LT, and if you combine that with his already inflated ego from high school, it only opened the door for more problems. Also, one quick thing I want to mention is that if y'all remember, he started out his senior season being the #1 overall prospect in the ESPN 300, but by the time he enrolled at TCU, he had fallen all the way to the 16th overall prospect, which is a significant drop. And it's hard for me to blame anything else but his behavior because, as we saw from his stats, the dude had the ability, but his behavior caused him to miss multiple games, which held him back from being more productive, and in turn was what I think the main reason for his decreased ranking. So anyway, he's at TCU, and as you would imagine, his time did not work out very well there. From the jump, in which I mean the first game of the season, he had already done something bad, which was unspecified, and his punishment was that he didn't start the first game of the season, which leads me to believe that he played, but he just didn't start. So as we can see, Zach was creating problems for yet another coach, but unlike his high school coach, it seemed that Gary Patterson had a harder time disciplining this kid, most likely because TCU was just such in need of that talent, even more than North Shore was. According to the staff at TCU, he was a nice and polite kid in person, but his off-the-field issues and diva personality told a different story. Throughout the next 2 seasons, he managed to stay with TCU, but at the conclusion of the 2021 season, he entered the transfer portal. In his time at TCU, he played in 15 games and had 146 carries for 1,063 yards and 9 touchdowns, along with 18 receptions for 206 yards and a receiving touchdown. He proved why he was the highest ranked recruit to go to TCU in over 2 decades, even if his stats aren't eye-popping. Those 15 games were over 2 seasons, and it was in that second season that he had quite the year. He only played in 6 games, I'm not exactly sure why, but in those 6 games had 648 yards and 5 touchdowns, which means that he was averaging over 100 and just under a tutty a game. So once again, the kid proved worthy of his high school ranking, and it seemed at this point that he was maturing a little bit. He committed to Ole Miss for the 2022 season, and he balled out for real. Behind Quinshon Judkins, who was arguably the best back in the SEC, dude carried the ball 144 times for 936 yards and 9 touchdowns, which was almost better than his 2 seasons combined at TCU. And as far as I could find, Lane Kiffin didn't have any major problems with Zach during his time at Ole Miss, so it seemed that after all of high school and 2 years of college, he was finally maturing. He entered the 2023 draft and was selected with the 215th overall pick by the Rams, and in his lone rookie season had just 9 carries for 19 yards. So when I look at Zach Evans' football career with an emphasis on his recruiting process, I see a super talented player, but due to immaturity and behavioral problems was not able to show his full potential. As we see, he eventually matured during his time with Ole Miss, but imagine if he had been able to do that in high school. He might not have dropped very far in the rankings at all if he had been able to play in every game of his senior season, but because of his immaturity, he missed games and therefore he wasn't able to. Then, even after high school, the whole thing with delaying his decision announcement over and over again was just completely unnecessary, and it ended up costing him when Georgia released him from his letter of intent. So what we can see is that he is uber talented, like that's evident. But what's also evident is that strictly talent will not allow you to show your full capabilities. This is a guy who throughout his time in high school and even a little at TCU showed that he did not care about the team, and when that's the case, it's hard to have this dude in your program no matter how talented he is. But it seems like he got things together in his lone season at Ole Miss, and even though he did not have a good rookie season with LA, there's definitely still time to develop, and I hope that he's able to put together some good seasons. Alright guys, that's going to do it for this one. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and share it, as that helps the channel to grow. Besides that, until next time.